Neurodiversity, and for tonight our speaker is Audrey Bartholomew. She is an associate professor and coordinator of special education programs at the University of New England, and she currently teaches coursework in special ed courses including introduction to special education, autism, special education methods, and supporting challenging behavior. Audrey's research interests include scholarship of teaching and learning, and how to include students with disabilities in general education through meaningful instruction and positive behavior supports. She has experience teaching special education K-12 and has provided extensive training in Maine and other states on developing meaningful secondary transition plans. Audrey is a parent of a child receiving special education services and is passionate around family voice in both school and community services. Finally, she is a volunteer with the state of Maine as an educational surrogate and sits on the executive board for the Maine Parent Federation, Maine Trikers, and the Maine Council for Exceptional Children. I welcome Dr. Audrey Bartholomew.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, beautiful renovations, beautiful school. Very happy to be here. And very happy to speak to all of you. It's been a while since I've used a microphone, so please tell me if I need to get closer to the microphone. I always feel like people are gonna eat the microphone, but I think you have to be pretty close, or if I need to go back. The other thing is that I have a tendency to talk quickly, and I know there are interpreters in the audience, so please just, throw your shoe at me or whatever you need to do to get my attention, and I will do my best. But when I get excited, I talk fast. So that's how you can gauge my excitement. I am a professor at the University of New England in special education. I've been there about 12 years. So I'm just really excited to be here. I'm a parent in Portland schools. As Grace said, I have 2 daughters. I have a picture of them. They have no privacy at all. I talk about them all the time in my coursework. So if you read the description for this event, you might have thought, oh, that's a lot to fit into 2 hours. So, and everybody in this audience, I think we could probably, we've got people who are close to being experts and people who are brand new at disabilities and special education. So I'm going to do my best, but what would be even better is if you ask questions and we had good discussions and we're able to learn from each other. So the goals for tonight is to have a very basic understanding of what some common disabilities. So we are starting at ground zero for some of it, but I promise not all of it. Have a very basic understanding of families' rights within the special education system, and describe some recommendations on how best to partner with your child's school, and then identify resources for more information. Just a few notes about this presentation. Get ready to talk with the people at your table, so I hope you chose wisely. And again, ask questions, share your stories. I think one of the best things that, as parents is we can come together and learn from each other because we've all had different experiences in the system. So please be ready to do that. Oh, there they are. So I do have my PhD in special education, but this is the perfect little image, a master's of everything, right? Because I'm a mom. So these are my kids. I've got my older daughter in 9th grade who's asked me not to use her name. That's fine. She has finally gotten to the point where she doesn't know what she wants to be when she grows up, which delights me, because last year it was a bartender, which is fine. Being a bartender is fine, but she was also 12. So, and I have my 4th grader, whose name is Betty. She attends Rowe School, and she does receive special ed services. She wants to be a YouTuber when she grows up. Pretty typical. I bet some of you have 4th graders who want to be a YouTuber. So, for 20 years, I was a professional in special education. I'm a former teacher. I got my doctorate. I've worked for federal grants. And then a couple of years, well, let's see, Betty's 9, about 6 years ago, I moved to the other side of the table and I became a parent in special education. And it just rocked my world. Totally rocked my world. So I think that having both those experiences have been really invaluable for my job. And I see some familiar faces in the crowd. And many of those people would tell you that I also love to help other families. I certainly do not know everything, but I try, and I know who to ask if I don't know. So, I have little stickies. They're not index cards, they're stickies. That's what the dollar store had on my way here. These are for any questions you may have. If you want to write down a question, I also am happy to take questions as we move along. There's no, raise your hand, ask it. If you're someone where you have a question, but maybe you want to ask it in private, or you don't want to have everybody know who's asking this question, you can also just, write down a question and put it up here, and eventually I will ask it, or I'll answer it, ask it and answer it. Some of these questions are private, some of them can be, we're dealing with some emotional topics here, so any way that you need to get that. The other thing is, my email address is at the end of this PowerPoint, and we're recording this, so it'll be on the website. Write down my email address and ask away. So before we move into, I'm gonna reach out to you all first. So the first thing I want to know is who you are. So if you're a parent, raise your hand. So good, Parent University, expected that. And actually, I'm gonna just rephrase the language a little bit to say family, because it's not always parents. Sometimes it's grandma, sometimes it's aunt, sometimes it's older sister. So if you're a family member, I'm happy to have everybody, but family too. Raise your hand if you have a child with a disability. So many of you do. Can you raise your hand if you maybe have some concerns about your child, but they haven't been identified yet? Okay, all right. Good to know. And then raise your hand if you want to know more about disabilities. And then raise your hand if you want to know more about special education. Okay. So this is going to help me a little bit, because again, I was coming into this like, I don't know who's going to come to this. So that's really good to know. Okay. I want you, so this is where you're going to have to turn and talk. I make my college students do this all the time, so you're going to have to do it also. I want you to think about where you are on the scale of 1 to 5 about these statements, okay? So before I ask you, and we call this, we actually call it fist to 5 in school, where you're gonna hold up your hand and I'll read the statement and you show me what number you are. So if I say, show me how much you agree with, I am worried about my child's progress in school. If you're not really worried about it, hold up a 1. But if you're really worried about it, hold up a 5, and then anywhere in between. Before we do that, I want you to introduce yourselves to your tables and just talk a little bit, while you're here, really quickly though. We're just gonna, because some of the tables are big. So just go around, introduce yourself, maybe tell who your child is, maybe one thing you want to learn tonight. I wanted to add one super important thing about what I do. I am also a substitute in Portland schools. I know some of you are like, poor woman, but no, actually, I really enjoy it, and today I subbed at Moore. Anybody have kids who are at Lyman Moore? All right, that's where I was. I had a great time. The reason why I'm a substitute is because I just need to get a reality check of what's happening in schools, so. My UNE job's okay. All right. All right, I'm going to go through the first statement. I am worried about my child's progress in school. If you are okay with this, if you're like, I'm not really worried, you're gonna hold up a 1. If you're really worried, hold up a 5. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Okay. You see? Okay. All right. Okay. I am worried, so this is a little more specific. I am worried about my child's reading, writing, and/or math skills. Uh-oh, I see it. Do I see like a 10 somewhere? Oh, 2 separate kids. I thought you were giving me a 6. Okay. You're like, I'm gonna hold up my foot. No, okay. I'm worried about my child's behavior. Okay. Sounds about right. And the last one is, my child struggles at home. Okay. Oh, I got you. I got your 10 back there. Okay. I wanted to share this slide, and these are all links, so you'll be able to click on these if you want more information. Special Ed loves acronyms. We love our jargon. This is a lot of them, so if you're interested in learning more, it's linked, and it's actually linked to my favorite website, which is understood.org, and I have that linked in the resources. But if you're looking for any information about disabilities, the process of special ed, it's written in a very understandable language, it's very accessible. Okay. So we're going to do a couple slides on different disabilities. So this is a good time, as I go through this information, if you have questions. So these are the 5 that I've included. This does not, obviously, there are a lot more disabilities. And I don't want you to walk away thinking that we only cherry pick certain disabilities to really talk about. I wanted to think about ones that, if you had a child and you were concerned about them, that this might be a disability, and you might want to know that label and that language. In the disability world, we do have to use labels, unfortunately. It's what kind of opens the door to certain services and helps get us moving along. But I will say that when I talk to my students, I talk about characteristics. And I say, okay, this student has slow processing speed. What does that mean? Because you can have slow processing speed if you have a learning disability, maybe ADHD, intellectual disability. So we try to focus on characteristics, but I think understanding these labels is helpful. So this is like, I mean, this is my whole job. So this is about the most basic I can be. A learning disability affects reading, writing, and math. Students may seem to have no issues outside of school. Typically, these are identified first, second, third grade, because that's the time where we start to see students learning to read, learning to write, learning to do math. Typically, not all the time. Does anybody have any comments or questions about, like, that's all I'm going to talk about? Yes?
It affects reading, writing, and math.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to be all 3, or could it be
No.
all?
So she asked, I'm going to try my best to repeat the question so everybody can hear. If a student is identified with a learning disability, does it have to affect all 3? And it does not. My daughter, again, no privacy, she's only in 4th grade, she doesn't care yet. She was originally identified with a language delay when she was 3. And then speech language pathologist said, you know, I don't think it's language. There's something else there. So she got identified with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. And then when she was in 2nd grade, she got identified with a reading and writing disability. And I think math is on its way. But you don't have to have all 3. And reading is the most common, definitely the most common. Any other questions about a learning disability? Yes? Okay. Yeah, so the question is, are there different types of learning disabilities? There are. So for example, under the reading umbrella, there's dyslexia, but then you also could have just a general unspecified reading disability where they have trouble understanding what they've read. Whereas dyslexia is more about, are you able to decode, are you able to sound out those words? So there are definitely differences. In terms of the IEP label, I don't know that I know exactly what the differences are, I'll be honest with you. But to me, that, in my experience with my daughter, and this is how it should be, that should not affect the services or the programming, right? Because it's about your child, not their label. Should. That's the key word. Any other questions? Yeah?
So this is going to be a question for all of them.
Okay, oh, all right, let's phone a friend or call the audience, whatever that thing is.
For all of the...
Oh, for all the, oh, I got excited, sorry, we don't need you. Okay, yes.
If a parent has one of these,
Yeah.
is there increased likelihood?
Good question.
Might be different.
Yeah, so if a parent has a learning disability, are their children more likely to have one? And yes, they are. There is a genetic link. I don't know how much, but there is definitely a genetic link there. My brother-in-law has a very severe learning disability, like cannot read, and he's in his 40s. And so having my daughter have a learning disability is not a huge surprise. One of the other warning signs for a reading disability is having delayed language. When a toddler is starting to acquire language and they have a delay, often those children will be labeled with dyslexia. Yes, question?
So I'm like 3 years old.
Oh, you have a 3-year-old?
And then she cannot say no words at all.
Yeah.
And also we apply.
Okay.
Everywhere, even the CDS.
Okay, CDS, which is Child Development Services, that's our early childhood, before you get to kindergarten.
So we cannot find it at all. People sound like way better than
Yeah. So,
they don't have no transportation at all either.
okay. All right. I want to hold on that when we talk about rights, families' rights. And then if I'm not able to give you information, come find me, okay? We'll connect. But I bet there are a lot of stories like that, right? CDS, we know, struggles, the early childhood, but also the districts struggle. Their providers, their timelines. So we're going to talk about rights. That was a good question. Thank you. Okay. Our next disability is intellectual disability. This affects reading, writing, math, but also affects daily life skills. So your child may struggle to, maintain their belongings. They may struggle to meet those developmental milestones, like walking at a certain age, talking at a certain age. This is usually identified before school because we do use those developmental milestones. So the way that my daughter was identified, she does not have an intellectual disability, but it was before she got to school. It was through a screening at her pediatrician. So when you go to the pediatrician and you have to fill out that like 10, are they pointing? Are they using this many words, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the pediatrician said, I think we should do a referral for an evaluation. Okay, again, delayed milestones. Any questions about intellectual disability? Okay. You guys are asking good questions.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You may have answered it.
That's okay.
But can you just give a couple of examples of what are each of those intellectual disabilities and learning disabilities? labels?
So, a learning disability might be dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia is math, dysgraphia is writing. Intellectual disability is a little bit different. Usually so the way that we define an intellectual disability, it's based on IQ, and it's based on someone's ability to sort of do those life skills. There aren't really types of intellectual disabilities. Sometimes a person just has one, but often it will come along with something else, such as autism, maybe a genetic disorder such as Down syndrome. There could be fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. That could come along with either of those. Does that make sense? So there aren't types of intellectual disability, but they're sort of like co-occurring.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, emotional behavioral disorder. Obviously, this affects behavior, which could be meaning like getting along with others, managing your emotions. It can be identified at almost any age, and it can be one of the most impactful disabilities on others. So what I mean by that is that when a student has an emotional behavioral disorder, their behavior is so different than how someone without that disorder would maybe respond or act. Okay, so we're not just talking about a student who gets dysregulated and like has what we might call a temper tantrum. This is a pattern, it's ongoing. That can be really hard. If you have a child like that, that can be really challenging for you. It can be very challenging for the teacher and the other students in the classroom. Yes, question?
Is this something that's typically a code with something else like you were just talking about? Are there any specific, like,
Yeah.
on the autism spectrum,
Okay.
he fits this category to a T? And so it's just like, should we,
Yeah.
I mean, we work with psychiatrists
Yeah.
like that, but are there other things we should be looking at?
So the question is, does an emotional behavioral disorder co-occur with other disabilities? So this is where we get into this situation where it's hard to parse out. So your child has autism, and we know that a lot of times children with autism don't communicate the same way, they take in sensory experiences differently, so there may be other factors due to their autism that cause the behavior, not necessarily an EBD. What I will say about it is it's not a perfect system, right? They're all social constructs, meaning somebody came up with the definition of an EBD one day, but who knows? So, did that answer your question?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll go with sort of. Yes, question in the back. Yes, that's a great question. So emotional behavioral disorder. So I work in labels in special education. So my whole background is in special ed, and there are 14 categories on the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. So, and it's actually emotional disturbance, which I'm just not a fan of, so we're gonna call it emotional behavioral disorder. But under that is a whole bunch of possibilities. Could be, they could develop schizophrenia, it could be depression, it could be, or it could be, again, it could be unspecified, where they just have maybe a conduct disorder, we might call it. Does that help? Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Can this also be something that comes later as a result, let's say, of trauma or something like that?
That's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that, but is that your question? Is that your question or your, okay. But I'm happy to follow up and see if that, because sometimes we say that, yes, they might have a disability, but it can't be due to other factors. But I don't know if that's true. I think, I want to say no. I mean, I want to say like, yes, it can be due to trauma, but I don't know for sure. Go ahead.
Is the gifted talented part of this? Is that the
That is a really good question. She said, are gifted and talented part of disabilities? Not in the special education sense. So gifted and talented is not part of the special ed system. It's something different. It's regulated by different laws. So states have a little more freedom in how school districts have a little more freedom in how they do gifted and talented, whereas special education is very well regulated across the country. Does that help? Okay. Yes?
Emotional behavior.
Yeah, disorder.
Is affected by cultural diversity
It's a good question.
and language also.
So I'm going to tell you what the textbook says, which is no, it shouldn't be, right? So when we evaluate students for disabilities, we have to do it in what's called a non-discriminatory way. So we're using assessments and evaluation tools that are culturally sensitive or, unbiased. So culture and, what was the other one you said? Language, right? Culture and language should not affect that. Does that always, do we see that though? Do we see probably a higher number of students who are culturally and linguistically diverse?
In terms of gender,
Well, boys are more likely. Now, there is some thought to say, are girls just better at hiding it? Do we just want to fit in and be a perfectionist, right? So, again, it's not a perfect system, which can be really frustrating. I wish there was just a blood test, right? You either have it or you don't have it. Unfortunately, it's not like that. Go ahead in the back.
So you had made a difference between just an outburst and a pattern.
Yeah.
So can you describe what a pattern would look like?
Sure.
And my follow-up question would be, are you basing, or is this kind of basing diagnosis on the biomedical model?
Oh, good question. That is a great question. So his question was, he gave me a twofer. His first question is, what's the difference between just an isolated outburst and a pattern? So a pattern would be something that we would see every time we say, okay, not that I know anything about this, but it's time to get off your iPad, and there's anger and maybe throwing the iPad, right? And that happens consistently. And in the classroom, the teacher has done, especially when we think about, let's say, a fourth grade general ed classroom, that teacher's got tricks, right? She's got the marble jar, and she's got the rules she's done everything that typically other kids will respond to. But for some reason, this kid is not responding. And that's what I would say is a pattern. Does that help? Okay. And his other question is a very good question, which is, are these diagnoses more like medical diagnoses? And they're not. There's a difference. When you get labeled in school for an IEP, what they're doing is just making sure you meet the criteria for special education. So so let's say I have a child with autism, okay, or suspected autism. And I take that child, I call my doctor and I say, I think my child might have autism. And they say, okay, I can't fit you in for 6 months. So in 6 months, I'll see your child. In the meantime, I go to the school and I say, I think my child has autism, but they haven't been identified by their doctor. The school still needs to go through that process and see, do they meet the criteria? Now, if they have met the criteria medically, it helps a lot. Kind of moves the process along. All right, I'm gonna go here and then I'll come back here. Yes?
One quick question
Yeah.
about that is, I just want to know if this is true or not.
Yeah.
Helping other parents, but I was told for an IEP you have to have a diagnosis. If you didn't, it was a 504. Is that?
No, that is not true. Her question was, to have an IEP, do you need a diagnosis? And if you don't have a diagnosis, do you get a 504 plan? So just really quickly, because I want you also to understand, an IEP is special education. Think of an IEP as a plan that outlines a student's year, and it's maybe 20, 30 pages. A 504 plan is also for children with disabilities, but it's much less involved. It's maybe 2 pages. And the difference between how you would receive one or the other is under the law for IEP, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, they have very specific definitions, and you have to fit, remember I said there were 14 categories? You need to fit into one of those 14 categories. However, can you come here and hold the mic for me? Okay, I'm gonna do a little visual. Thank you. Just my little van of light. If we think about definitions for IDEA or an IEP that fits between my arms, right? You have to have these specific criteria. What happens is a 504 plan is much broader, okay? So we can fit these areas in, outside my arms. Thank you, that was excellent. Thank you, thank you. So what might fit in those margins could be, for example, my niece had really bad allergies, and she was in school in Brooklyn, in this old, dusty school, and she had to have her own carpet square that she would like take out for circle time and sit on, because otherwise her allergies would be triggered. She also had to have an EpiPen, but that was about it. For that, she had a 504 plan, okay? Some of you might have children with a learning disability, but it's not, I hate to use the word severe because that's judgmental, but it's not a severe learning disability, and they can sort of make it with just some supports. They might qualify for a 504 and not an IEP. All right, yes, question in the back. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll go to you next. Or, it's okay. No. Is it possible to have an IEP and a 504? No. Easy answer. All right, sorry. I skipped you, sorry. It's a good question. When your child gets evaluated, almost for any disability, even a learning disability, families have to be involved in that process. If you have a child who has gotten evaluated, you've received that 100 question, they ask the same question 20 different ways, that you sit down and your husband checks out of, no, or that's just me. So yes, families have to be involved, and they take that into account. It's not a perfect system where you have like this number yeses and this number no's, and then what a school psychologist has to do when they're evaluating is basically pull evidence together and say, does this point to a disability? So, does that help?
Yeah, I
yeah.
If you have everyone at school is like,
yeah.
Totally fine, having a job, and then at home, like,
yeah. So,
I mean, I can say
yes.
The opposite, where at school, I don't mind speaking because we have the opposite, where at school my son has a hard time being in a traditional classroom. He will flip desks, he'll rip things off the wall, he'll hit people. At home we see none of that. So at school he really struggles, and then at home he's not.
And one thing I want to say about kids who keep it together at school but collapse at home, that can be that kid is working so hard to like fight all that, and then all of a sudden they get home and it's like, oh mom, I'm gonna just unload on you because you're my safe space. So that gets tricky. I don't know, that's like above my pay grade in terms of like, would they get a diagnosis, or would they meet criteria or not? I'm not sure, but it's something to definitely talk to school about. Okay. I really thought we were just gonna like boom, boom, boom through these slides. So I'm so excited, having a good time. Okay. All right, I have 2 more disabilities I want to cover. So, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. What's interesting about this one is if you have a child with ADHD, it is not one of those 14 categories in special ed. It almost always falls under the category of other health impairment, which is kind of like a lot of stuff could go under other health impairment, but it affects behavior. Now it affects behavior differently from an emotional behavioral disorder. This is where thinking about focus and activity levels. But this is also where we might see daydreaming, we might see just really unfocused, but not always really, really active. And I think that's what we think about ADHD, but there's room for other behaviors. Boys are identified more often, and this can be identified at any age. I feel like there's a lot of adults these days who are getting identified with ADHD. So, you know, those kids really worked hard during the school years to keep it together. Questions about ADHD? Yes?
I read an article that there was like 3 different ADHD types.
Yeah.
Is that true?
So she's asking if there are different types of ADHD. From a medical perspective, that might be true. I don't know that for sure. I think we think about it as I think about it as 2. One is focus and, you know, distractions, and the other one is more hyperactive. Those are kind of the 2 buckets that we think about from an education perspective. So medically, there might be another one. Yeah, go ahead. Oh yeah. Yes. Can you have ADHD and other disabilities? Yes, and in fact, ADHD and learning disabilities, there's something like a rate of 50% of, I forget if it's LD or ADHD, but they co-occur, like my daughter. But is one impacting the other? Is the other impacting the, you know, so it's hard to sometimes parse out. That's why we work with characteristics and not labels. All right. And finally, autism. Autism affects social skills, communication, daily behaviors. In certain cases with autism, academics may be fine, but we see an impact on social skills. But we also see students who are labeled with autism who have trouble communicating, who might have an intellectual disability. So there really are many different ways that autism can manifest. We try to identify it young, particularly around those milestones in language. The earlier we identify it, and the earlier we get you services, the better. Which is why the CDS, why it's so frustrating that early childhood struggles so much. Mild cases may pop up later, and the reason for that is because, again, the more quote-unquote mild cases, the big marker may be social skills, and so we start to see social demands increase 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. That's where kids start to maybe stick out a little more if they're not sort of in that mainstream social thing. Questions about autism? Okay. Oh yeah, go for it.
I had heard that autism and ADHD are now considered to be on the same spectrum. What do you think of that statement?
So his question was, I heard autism and ADHD are the same spectrum. You know, just wake me up when they make a decision. You know, like, again, I think this is where it comes into like, I think labels are important, and they definitely tell us things, but really getting to know the student or your child is most important. I hadn't heard that. Autism was redefined maybe, let's see, 12 years ago, 10 years ago. They got rid of, you might know the term Asperger's. We don't use that anymore. So who knows? It's been 10 years, maybe they'll redefine that. Other questions? Yes?
What role does like the internet, YouTube, and social media play into exacerbating these?
So the question was, how much does the internet play in exacerbating these? In terms of the children or the people deciding if they have the disability?
Like, has there been an increase in diagnosis since COVID, that people are upgrading on YouTube?
I don't know. Oh, like, okay, so like the more screen time, the more likely you are to have. That, I don't know. There is a connection between screen time and ADHD. So the more that a child uses screen time, I mean, there's a correlation. It may not be causal, right? So it could be that your child with ADHD needs, I don't know, anyway. I don't know. I don't think they can tell that yet from COVID. So I don't know if there's been an increase, but that's a good question. Okay. Whew. Right. So I just wanted to give 5, just 5, strategies for home and school. So and I'm coming from this from a teacher and a parent perspective. And this is where you all probably have some ideas too. So raise your hand. The first one I would recommend is routines, and this is really for any disability. The more routines you can put in your day in terms of home and school, the better. It just helps students, they understand what's expected of them, so then we don't maybe see behaviors. They're able to be successful if they can learn those routines. I know as a teacher, it just makes it that much more manageable. Does anybody have a good routine that they use with their child that they're like, can you share? Okay. We'll take your word for it. Anybody else have like a morning routine or an after school routine? What do you guys do? I'm going to give you the mic so I don't repeat it.
So school days in the morning does not apply to weekends.
Okay, all right. Not weekends, just school days.
Yeah, we get my oldest up. He uses the bathroom. He gets himself dressed while I'm getting myself ready for the day. He brushes his teeth. Needs a little bit of help there. Then he helps me empty the dishwasher and helps me make coffee.
Nice.
We pack his backpack together, which is just a lunchbox because everything else is in there. And then we walk off towards the bus stop.
Thank you.
And so if you didn't have that routine, it might be a little chaotic, right? We might see some more behaviors. We might see a lot of yelling, like, get yourself together, everybody. So routines can be really, really helpful for children. In addition to routines, consistency. And here, I'm gonna just be the first one to say, consistency can be really, really challenging, especially if you have a child with some behavior challenges, which my daughter has some. We have this, so my daughter really, really likes her iPad. I mean, loves her. Like, if the house was on fire and she had to choose between her iPad and the dog, I think it would be the iPad. So we have a rule. You get 3 iPad turns a day. She gets 1 in the morning, and she gets 2 after school. I can't tell you how many times she's gotten way more iPad turns than that, right? It's just really hard to be consistent. I think in school it's a little bit easier as a classroom teacher, but it's important that you have consistency because, again, kids know what to expect. They know how you're going to respond. They know what you want from them. Yes? Yeah. Yes. I'm going to repeat this. Yes. So this is what I love to hear. So you talked about visuals?
Yeah. So like visual, routine, schedule, and then
So here's an example of a visual morning routine. There's this website called Lesson Pics, and you can get free pictures. So if you wanted to make a routine, and they can check it off, or they just follow it. The woman in the back also brought up a visual timer. And let me tell you, the visual timer was the MVP of lockdown in my house. Because I was also working. And I mean, iPad and TV, they were quite the babysitters. So what a visual timer does is, it's also called a time timer. And your iPhone has an app that you can use, a time timer. And what it does is it has a clock, and it shows how much time is left by color. And as the time runs out, the color gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So what it does is it takes this really abstract concept of time, and it makes it concrete for students. And this is especially important for students with autism, because that's typically difficult for them. Yes? No, keep at it. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right. And so she talked about that there are parent controls on her iPad that can shut them down. But that can be, and I think this is what you were trying to say, is all of a sudden, if that pops up and that iPad turn is over, kids can be like, no way. Like, I was not prepared for this. I was really into Roblox. I'm going to keep going. But the timer tells them how much time is left. And those parent controls, I'm just going to tell you a story. My older daughter, sure, you can use your iPad, but we set it shuts off at 9 o'clock at night. Well, there's like a button that's like, do you want to ignore this? And she just was like, yeah, I want to ignore it. And like in 2 weeks, she's like so tired. I'm like, why are you so tired? Are you on your iPad at night? She's like, no, I'm not on my iPad at night. And then you can go in and see when the iPad's being used, and I'm like, 2 a.m. So just be aware, if there's an ability to like ignore that, your child will ignore it. Take advantage of strengths, and this is where the theme embracing neurodiversity, I think, is brought into this. So I think about students with autism, particularly thinking about, they're very visually based, so thinking about, okay, what can my student do well? Well, they can follow a visual schedule really well. So many do that a lot. What else do they do well? Well, you know what, they're really interested in dinosaurs. So I'm going to try and integrate dinosaurs into maybe activities that are really challenging for them. So thinking about, we're not always, this is what I try to tell my students when they're learning to be teachers is, we don't always just want to focus on like fix, and what are the needs, but how do we like, I want to say exploit strengths, not exploit, but like make them bigger and have other people recognize them. I was talking to somebody when it was back to school, and they were talking about their son. Oh, and they had to feel like the teacher had like a "tell me about your son" paper, and it was like, tell me what they're good at. And she was like, I can't even answer this. I have to put this away and come back and really think about what are they good at. And I think I have perfected the art of telling you what my daughter is good at while also telling you what she is not good at. So I'll say something like, does really well with a visual timer. Does really well when given structure and routine, right? So it's sometimes hard to think about those strengths and think about those things that they can do well, but it's important. Especially it might be important for us to tell our teachers. Operate in increments, meaning baby steps. I show this great video in one of my classes, and it's a little advertisement to be a special ed teacher, and it's all moms talking about the kids that their teachers have had, or the teachers that their kids have had. And the one mom she says, our kids are the hothouse flowers, right? These kids are identified for a reason, and I think that we need to adjust our expectations around success. And that's really hard, and I would never say that before I became a parent of a child with a disability, because I know it can be really challenging, and if that's something that you struggle with, I totally understand that. And then finally, seek outside help. So there are a lot of programs. There are a lot of programs that aren't staffed, unfortunately, at this time, so it can be hard to find outside resources. But if you do have a child that has what the state of Maine, like a significant medical disability, they're eligible for Katie Beckett, which is Maine Care, that regardless of income limits. That means they can be eligible to have a behavioral health professional that comes to help them. You can get a caseworker. So there's lots of outside help that you can get. But really, if you have those children, and my child wouldn't be one that would be eligible for that, there's not a lot of outside help for our kids, right? So, especially when we think about like childcare and rec programs, those can be really challenging. All right, it's time for you to talk. What questions or concerns do you have about your child? So, do you want to talk at your table first? And then you're my number one, I'll call it on you first. Just chat amongst yourselves a little bit. I'm going to take a breath. Drink of water. Okay. I'm going to bring us back. I'm going to go ahead and bring us back. And there are two things. One, I'm back to my chord. Here I was going to do a whole dance routine for you. But Grace is going to come around with the cordless mic if you want to ask a question or say something. Let me forget. Okay, so we'll keep moving and then I'll remember. The next part of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about special education and rights. So I may ask you to hold if your question is about that, and we'll get into that. So would anybody like to, oh, this is the other thing I want to say. This is being recorded, okay? And it's going to be on the website, right? So,
but we are not going to put the camera on you.
Right.
But we will want to hear your questions so that then the people in the virtual audience can connect with the questions. So, but we're not putting the camera on you.
So I would avoid names, teachers, schools. If you want to put a question on the yellow paper and just pass it over to me, I'll read it and answer it. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. So do you want to start back there? Concerns in the green and the purple? She had her hand up like 20 minutes ago. So. Okay.
Hi, yes, my child is in a first grade class, and we received a message from the school saying that a service that was previously provided was no longer going to be provided because they weren't, for whatever reason, able to hire someone for that position. And there have been sort of ebbs and flows of a similar nature, services being available and then not available, or staffing changing, and I understand there's many reasons for that, but I'm just curious, and I know this might bleed into the rights section, but like who do we go to and how do we deal with those disruptions in service?
That is a great question. Has anybody else experienced that you've been told due to staffing? So if you haven't had that, it's coming. I'll tell you, special ed is a hard field to convince people to go into these days, and that's what I do. It's really hard. So Portland is not any different from any other district that are experiencing vacancies. I work with many, many districts, and every district is struggling. I would say ed techs particularly, so those are like your classroom aides, those positions are very challenging to fill. So I'm going to tell you a story about when my child was in early childhood. So she got, let's see, it was pre-pandemic, so isn't that how we all operate? It's probably like 2018, 2019. The doctor put in evaluation, or put in a referral for her to be evaluated. That evaluation goes to Child Development Services, or CDS. CDS contacts me, and they say, we're gonna do a speech language evaluation, but we don't have anybody right now, right? There's a waiting list. So I grapple with this. There are almost any decision that I make when I work with schools, I grapple with my privilege and my ability to navigate the system. What I did was I said, that's illegal. I know that's illegal to say that, and she needs to have the evaluation. And the next day, oh, we found someone who can do the evaluation. All that happened was they bumped somebody else off, right? They bumped off maybe one of your children because you don't have a PhD in special education and you don't teach a class in special ed law. So it is illegal. Schools have to, so I'm going to tell you what the law says, and I do teach a class on special education law, but I also will tell you there are a lot of things I don't know. So schools have to provide what your child needs when they're in special education. And do you mind sharing what the service was?
The was
Okay, so they didn't have a speech language pathologist? Yeah, so they have to provide that. Okay, what does that mean? How does that help? Because I do think that schools are almost always doing the best they can. Let's say 88% of the time, right? They want to do what's best for the child. So you have a choice. You can either say, okay, I understand, I'm very concerned about my child, it's very important that they have speech language services, please do everything you can to get a speech language pathologist, and then you wait. Your other option, which is not a good option either, is to say, I know that's illegal, and I'm going to contact the state, or I'm going to contact a lawyer, okay? Now, I have a couple resources for if you want to go to, like if there's procedural safeguards and procedural due process, so we can talk a little bit through those. But that's not going to get you a speech language pathologist, right, if there are none. But what it might do is if there are enough of us that say, hey, we can't get SLPs, and then Portland goes to the state and says, hey, I have all of these parents, right? It can be a little bit of like a systems change. I can't promise that will happen. But what I can say, and if any of you, I once talked to a parent who really, she was working with a school, when she was thinking about suing a school district. And she said, I'm really worried about using my privilege because I just don't, you are your child's best advocate. It's you. You're gonna be the one, right? As a classroom teacher, I had 10 kids I had to think about. You have one, maybe two, if you're lucky. So just, remember that. Yes?
Is it a bad idea?
Hold on, Grace can bring you the mic.
So if you have good insurance, can you go to your pediatrician and get a referral if you're on a wait list, or do you advocate not doing that?
So what Rita's talking about is medical services, which are totally separate from school. So if your child receives speech language services in school, they can also receive it outside of school. They do not speak to each other, okay? Absolutely. If you can get private therapy, your insurance has to pay for it. But again, if you have a child who qualifies for Maine Care, remember that Maine Care is income-based. I know I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds, but this is so important. Maine Care is income-based, but there is a special program in the state called Katie Beckett, that even if you make too much money for Maine Care, your child may qualify for Katie Beckett, and that would cover the cost and covers co-pays. So if you have a child who has they call it a medical disability, but I think it needs to be, I have a friend who has a daughter with Down syndrome, I have a friend who has, kids with autism. Again, more mild disabilities probably aren't going to qualify, but any of those, you can apply for Katie Beckett, and that would help with those outside therapies. So excellent, thank you for that suggestion. Who else has a concern or a question? I'll give her my mic, Grace.
I have a question around stimming.
Just pull a little bit closer. Yeah.
So my daughter stims. She's done it since she was little. She's 8 now, and I always ask her if she does it in the classroom, and she always says no. But I know she does. We received a picture, and there she was with her headphones on, and she was rocking.
Okay.
And every time I ask anyone about what do we do about it, I'm just afraid at this point she's in 3rd grade. So, people know this.
Yeah. So her question, she was asking about stimming, which if you don't know what stimming is, it's repetitive behavior that we see in children with autism.
She's got ADHD.
She has ADHD, okay. So we see it a lot in children with autism also, and it could be they're spinning in circles, they're rocking, maybe they're flapping their hands. There's all types of ways to stim. And so your question is, how do you address that? How can the school address it? Is that the...
Yeah, I don't know how to address it. I mean, I give her space to do it. It's definitely like a built up throughout the day.
Yeah. So I think, so is it interfering with her school, with classwork?
I don't know.
Okay. So I would ask the school, is this a behavior that's interfering with her or anybody else's classwork? If so, or could you collect data on it? Can we start to see when does it happen more than others, right? And you probably have some idea, right? And so thinking about those like quote unquote triggers and kind of approaching it two ways. One, how do we maybe try and eliminate those triggers as much as possible? And if stimming is not, so first of all, if your child stims and you're okay with it, that's totally fine. This isn't something that everybody needs to change in their child. But if you do want your child to not stim, think about ways to either, how can she deal with those triggers? Or what is she getting out of that stimming? Maybe is there something else we can give her? So that's kind of the approach, but you do have to have a good conversation with your school about that.
Do you have a conversation with the child?
Yeah, I mean, I would, for sure. If are they self-aware of it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
She's asking, do you talk with the child? And I would say, always talk with the child. My fourth grader, but my fourth grader is like, Mom, you know why I did that? It's because my ADHD mom. It's my ADHD mom. Like now she's like, everything she does is like, she blames on her ADHD. So just get ready when you start to empower your children. But yes, I would definitely do that, yeah. Other questions or concerns you have? Yes, middle table. Great. Oh, Grace in the back and then the middle table.
Hi. We have a second grader and he has ADHD. He was diagnosed at 4. He went into kindergarten with an IEP, but he's one of the kids that does perfect at school, and
Yeah.
almost when he loses it. So he's never really used the IEP, and they want to get rid of it.
Oh.
And we don't know because he was on medication for 2 years, and we just took him off for personal reasons. So I'm worried about that maybe affecting him this school year. To be, further on, we're going down to a 504 is okay? I'm not sure. That's something, should I let them do that or should I push for it?
So, I would
stay.
I would keep them on it if you can. Once you get rid of that IEP, it is hard to get it back.
What about the 504?
Okay, so the 504, remember the 504, remember my Vanna White? 504 is out here. Much easier to get. I'll tell you what I had to do for my older daughter to get a 504. First, I researched it because I was like, I need to know. I'm not an expert in 504, I'm an expert in IDEA. So she has anxiety. It was diagnosed through her doctor. And so I emailed the school, I said, I would like to have a meeting for a 504. She has a diagnosis, here's the letter. And that 100% sped things up. That was like, okay, come right in, we'll do it. And then if you've ever been through an IEP evaluation, it is like a slog, right? It's like tests and questionnaires, and it's gonna take weeks and weeks. This was, I sat in a meeting with a school counselor and a teacher, and basically we went through like 12 questions. And I don't know what the formula is, but if there were enough yeses, she qualified for a 504. And it was like that. One thing you need to know about a 504, and this is different from the IEP, is that a 504, when you talk about like, does this impact their daily life? Does it impact their ability to be productive? And those 12 questions or however many there are, you cannot take into account what they call, I forget what they call them, but they're basically like things we do to fix them. So medication, my child had just started medication, and she was doing much better, but you have to think about what if she didn't have that medication? And then it was like, oh, it was no brainer she had a 504. The only thing you can't do that with is glasses. If you can't like say, my child wouldn't be able to see without glasses. Like we're just gonna say, yes, they will always have glasses, so. But it's big, you have so few rights with the 504 compared to an IEP. So hold on to that IEP as long as you can. But it may be okay to let it go. If there's a medication change, I would just tell the school that. Let's see how these meds play out. Other questions or concerns? Okay, I'm gonna let Grace, because I'm calling people out of order and then I panic. All right.
The question is like, you know, with little children, can they copy other behavior from other kids? Like the kid that doesn't have autism but is so close to another student or kid that has it, can they copy and start behaving differently?
So can they copy other kids? If they don't have a disability, yes, sure, we can, but the evaluation process for special education is so thorough, they would be able to rule that out quickly. So don't, if that's what your child is doing, that school psychologist will be able to figure that out. All right, Grace, who do you want to, Grace is coming to you if you have a question.
I have a kid who's type 2 diabetic.
Okay.
For the past 6-7 months now.
Yeah.
She's spending lots and lots of time out the room to the nurse, because the nurse is all the way at the other end of the building. So she has to get checked for breakfast, lunch, this, that, all that, and bathroom. It's a non-stop thing. So most of the assessment that she gets done, she's either almost average, but 90% of them are below average. And
I'm sorry, what kind of assessment is it?
Just tests.
Like academics?
Yes.
Okay.
Summer school is very hard to get into. Like, you have to be literally non-verbal, like a newcomer or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as it used to be a few years ago. So my question is, how can I ask the school, what can they do? Because that's way too much time that she's spending coming and going. So even recess time, she only does 15 minutes of recess.
Because she's getting her blood checked?
So getting her blood checked, getting her food measured, getting her medicine, then going to the cafeteria itself takes time.
Does she have a 504 plan?
She does.
Okay. So what you want to do is you want to call a 504 meeting and you want to say, we got to fix this. Like, how can we make this better? Have you tried that already?
Okay. Sort of, but I got where I work in the school.
Okay.
You were her mom. You kind of know what to do when you go home. Read with her here and there, but it's not the same as the amount of learning she's missing.
Yeah.
When she's in her room.
Yeah. So do you think there's a way that can be improved, like all the time she's away?
At the moment, it's all just for the past 6-7 months. So we're still learning the news and all that stuff. So.
And when it comes to medical things like that, you know, diabetes, they're very careful, right? They are going to go over, they're going to over provide or over support. So I think having a conversation with the school and saying, like, I want you to know this is a priority for me to get this down, the time away from class, to get that, you know, that time down, and can we come up with a plan? Like, what can we do? How can we help this? Like, are there other school nurses that we can reach out to that might have more experience with this or something? There's got, you know, can she be in a classroom that's closer to the nurse? I don't know. You know, just start thinking creatively. But the school needs to know that that's what you want also. Other questions? Got a couple more.
I just had a question involving, like, when you need outside agencies like a BHP with your child, because we were on a wait list, we were approved, and then, like, in the summer we got denied because of one of his test scores for one of all those big evaluations, so we're on several different wait lists again. But is there ever a time that you can go outside of the school to find your own, like, private BHP to bring them into the school through, like, Katie, because we have Katie Beckett Insurance, which we had to have it through the school anyway. And we're kind of at a...
Do you have a case manager?
We sort of.
Okay.
It's Katie Beckett for anyone that hasn't. It's very difficult process.
Bureaucratic. Yes, it is. You need a case manager. That would be my biggest piece of advice. So again, if you have a child with medical needs, get a case manager. They're going to help you navigate some of that, where the BHP can come from. I mean, I've had families reach out to me and say, my child is supposed to get BHP services through this is outside of school. So just so you know, if you're like, what is this? This is outside of school. My child is supposed to get BHP services through this agency, but they don't have anybody. But if I find someone, they'll hire them. Like, they're like, do you have a college student who can do that? So I think I don't know the answer to that in terms of what Portland does with BHPs and how that works, but your case manager will know better. Oh, a BHP is a behavioral health professional. So if you do qualify for certain, like Maine care and certain services, you can get that. It's like someone might come after school and work with your child for a few hours, a couple days a week. Maybe they come to school with them and help them at school. I will say I know less about that because sometimes it works outside of the special ed process. This is coming. Yeah, look, you got hold right up here, like you want to take a bite out of it.
That's so weird. So I think my son has either ADHD and possibly dyslexia. I have it.
Okay.
So then, when can I request testing for these things?
Right. You're like my segue here.
Okay.
All right. Let's go. Okay. So I'm going to skip ahead to this slide. So the first step of special education is an evaluation. If you suspect at all that your child has a disability, you request that the school does an evaluation. I'm going to tell you a story about this that happened to me today about this, but this is the very first step that you're going to do. And don't feel like you need to, like it has to be blaring warning signs. If you just have a suspicion, have them evaluated. So the school needs to do that. Legally, they must do an evaluation. So you're going to reach out to your child's teacher with those concerns and say, I think they have a disability, I want them evaluated. Now, school psychologists are the people who run the evaluation, and I will say they are in high demand. So that's an area that they might, I don't know if the school is just going to push back, or they might say it's going to take a while, but just know that you have a right to an evaluation. There is a legal timeline, so once you make that request, there's so many days the school has to do it. This is something that districts are struggling to meet, I will be honest, but there is a legal timeline they must adhere to. So I was like, this is such a good tip. I'm gonna give this tip. Let me tell you what happened to me. So my daughter is already received special ed services. She started out, she came into kindergarten with under ADHD, and then I requested dyslexia, or reading, screening, and writing, reading and writing evaluation. My latest evaluation that I want done for my daughter is called an assistive technology evaluation. My daughter's in 4th grade. She cannot spell, and she cannot really read. She has a really good sight word, so she can read enough, but she cannot what we call decode or sound out words. So I really want her to be able to read and write. She's in 4th grade. We're moving into the reading to learn phase where she's got to have some of those skills. She doesn't have them. So I want her to be able to, what do, right? Sometimes when we're on our phone and we do speech to text, where we'll like send a message, but we hit the little microphone button, or we have the screen read to us. I want her to be able to access those tools. There are a lot of tools out there for kids in school. So in June, very end of the school year, I send a letter to my daughter's special ed teacher. I contact someone in the district. I think I might have copied someone at the school, like the assistant principal. I said, I am writing to officially request an assistive technology evaluation. I cited the law. I also cited communication from the federal government about assistive technology within the past year and how important that is. And I said, please consider my letter as my consent for evaluation. Because before your child is evaluated, you must have informed consent. So that happened at the end of the school year, and I was like, that's fine. And I've been thinking about it, but I sort of wanted everybody, teachers to settle in. They've got a lot going on. Well, I got an email today from my child's daughter that I have to sign a consent form. I said, no. I sent that letter that said, consider this my consent. That doesn't work in Portland schools. Now I have an email out to a few places to say, like, legally, because the difference is, did my timeline start in June Or is it going to start when I sign this form that I haven't even gotten yet because you forgot to send it home today? Okay? I think the school district might be right because it's called informed consent, so you actually have to talk about what you're going to get, what's going to be part of the evaluation. So ignore this tip because it turns out it doesn't work. There is a form that you have to sign. And what I would say is, I want to request an evaluation. I want to set up that meeting to talk about what that evaluation will be. Here are the times and dates I'm available, and then make sure that that happens. Yes?
Is that form a matter of public record? Could you find it online?
They're statewide, they have them, but I don't know if Portland has their own. So that's good. He asked if could I find it online. I'm going to go to the school tomorrow morning and sign it. And I'm just going to, it's silly. Like, you send it home, send it back, and yes?
Is the assistive device in addition to reading assistance?
Yeah, so she gets reading instruction every day for 45 minutes, I would say. So what this would be an evaluation to say, what devices are good for her? What devices work well in 4th and 5th grade? What kind of instruction do we need to provide for her? And again, I'm just going to remind you, I definitely go back and forth with my privilege about that, right? I bet many of you didn't even know that that was possible. But I know. That's why I'm here.
Transition meeting on Monday.
Okay.
I'm going to ask exactly that.
Ask about assistive technology and evaluation. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, good luck. Oh, here is the timeline. I actually looked it up because even though I teach a special ed law class, I just have this like number blindness. So I'm going to request the evaluation. Now they're supposed to send I am supposed to sign that within 15 days, and that 15 school days, and that didn't happen. So then they have 45 school days. Now that's for maybe there are 2 different initial evaluation versus not like my daughter's already in special ed, so it might be a little bit different. You meet to determine eligibility, and then you have your first what's called an IEP meeting. You need to be a part of these steps. Yes?
If my son already has an IEP, and I want him to test more,
Yeah.
request.
Yes. Yes. So her question is, my child already has an IEP. Maybe you have a child who has an IEP and you want them evaluated for occupational therapy skills or speech language skills, maybe a service that they're not getting. For my child, she had ADHD. I wanted her tested for a reading disability. I had to go through that whole process.
So it's a similar process, just...
It's similar, the days might be a little different.
Okay.
And I have a resource for you if you want to know more, just any questions about special ed at the end. Yeah, question.
What is RTI? Is it comes before IUB, RTI?
Oh, RTI. So she's asking, what is RTI? RTI stands for Response to Intervention. Response to intervention is something they traditionally do in elementary schools in reading and math. And what it does is, let me see how I can put this the easiest way. It looks at your child and asks, is my child learning from the instruction I'm giving them? Are they responding to the instruction? And there are phases to it. And if they keep not responding, then they can be found eligible for a disability. So RTI comes before special ed. It doesn't have to though. You do not need to have your child in RTI to have them evaluated for special ed. That was a good question, thank you. Okay. The individualized education program, this is your really important document. It has goals, supports for the class, services, it has everything. This is your legal contract to what your child is entitled to. I cannot overstate its importance, okay? You absolutely should have input on this. The law says families need to be involved. Legally, you are allowed to record this meeting, and I will encourage you to do so. And that is not because you want to catch something. That is because even I have a hard time getting all that, right? I'll go home and I'll be like, what was that? What did we talk? I mean, and first of all, it's such an emotion. It can be really emotional for parents, especially in the beginning, but even still, record it and just tell the school, I'm going to record this. And you can do an audio recording. It's not a problem. So just let the school know. I want to make something very clear about the IEP, and this is vastly misunderstood in the state of Maine. There is nothing in the law that says families have to agree to the IEP. If you go to Massachusetts, there is a place on the IEP that says, I agree with this IEP or I disagree with this IEP. And if parents disagree, the school has to respond to that. Maine does not have that law. If you disagree with the IEP, the school can still put the IEP into place. That is a big misunderstanding, so please understand that. Let's say you do have a disagreement. During the meeting, they take notes. It's called the written notice. So you're going to get an IEP and you're going to get a written notice. Your written notice should reflect any disagreements you have. Okay? Because down the line, what if you keep disagreeing, keep disagreeing, keep disagreeing? You want a record of that. Okay? Any questions about that?
Yeah, yes, I have.
Oh, yes.
Can you go back
Yes.
to the disagreement part here?
Oh, yeah.
So if you're telling me if a parent says, no, I do not want this for my child.
They can refuse special ed services, yes. Sorry, I thought you meant like something in the IEP.
Okay, so, all right, so they can refuse the services.
They can.
And that means then the plan will not be put into effect without their consent?
Yes, you have to consent to special ed services. I don't know what happens if that happens though. Like, I don't know if the school will try and put it into place anyway, or the initial IEP, you do have to say, yes, I want special ed services. But if you go and then you say, okay, I want special ed services, and then you have the IEP, and let's say they say, you know what, your child is doing amazing in occupational therapy, we're going to stop that service, and you disagree, you don't really have a recourse to disagree. They don't need you to agree in the state of Maine.
For stopping.
For changing something, yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
for example, I work with families, let's say, who they don't necessarily request the evaluation, right?
Right, maybe the teacher.
The teacher might say, hey, you know, can we do this?
Families can stop the process. They don't have to agree to the evaluation. They do not have to agree to the IEP or special ed services.
And they will not, and then the kid will not get any of those services.
I don't think so, yeah. I don't know, the school may like try and work with the family to educate them and say, you know, why this is so important, but I don't think the school would move forward. Unless it was truly a critical need. Like if they were injuring other children or they needed to provide some kind of service that fell under special ed. So that's a little gray, I don't know the clear answer. Question? Just get the mic behind you.
So my daughter was graduated from her IEP.
She loved that. Congrats! You've graduated.
And it was under an annual review.
Yep.
It was an hour-and-a-half long virtual meeting. And in the beginning, the psychiatrist or basically she said that we're all going to discuss and we're all going to be in agreement at the end. Everyone from all of her specialized services, her teacher, everyone gave their opinion. We decided on a plan to move forward, and then the psychologist was like, I'm sorry, she just doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
And that was that. So is that, I mean, we have since gone through the process of setting up a 504, and she had a really great second grade teacher, so we really lucked out. But
So I don't know. I'm going to tell you, I don't know. Like, do parents need to agree with dropping?
Right.
I do know they'll drop they dropped speech therapy, and I really pushed to not drop it, and they just said, we're going to drop it. And I had to think about, like, okay, where's my energy best spent with this? So if there is a disagreement, you have options. Okay, so first of all, if you have any questions, you can call the Department of Ed. It's called Special Services and Inclusive Education or something. I have an email out to them. Just wrote an email today about my daughter's evaluation. They also will give the school an IEP facilitator, and this is no cost, right? This doesn't cost any money. So if you find that your IEP team is just, struggling to agree, or there's some, disagreements about the law, an IEP facilitator from the state can come in. You also can get mediation, which is a higher level to that, where they really work with the two sides to try and come to an agreement. If that doesn't work, or you can go right to this. You don't have to go through these. You can go right to what's called a state complaint, and you can fill that out right on the DOE website, and they just ask you, what is the complaint? What was the impact of this? That's actually a pretty easy thing to do. And what happens is the Department of Ed comes and investigates it, and they try and fix it. So if you run into an issue where you're pushed off because you don't have a service, there's not someone to do it, a state complaint might be worth filling out. And then finally, you can do due process, which is essentially you're suing the school district. There's a whole, I don't know, in some states you can use an advocate, you don't always need a lawyer, but there are a couple of lawyers in the state of Maine that specialize. There's one in Portland particularly who does a lot of due process. I've been involved in a couple due process hearings as a teacher and also as a expert witness. They're not fun, they're really drawn out, they're really emotional, and you don't have to, it's gonna take you like months before you get any kind of resolution. But if you have a question, these are the two people that I emailed today. I emailed the Department of Education and I emailed the Maine Parent Federation. If you walk away from this with any resource, it's the Maine Parent Federation. Every state has like a hub of information and resources. They're federally funded, they're funded by different grants. In Maine, it is called the Maine Parent Federation. Different states have different names. The woman who runs it is excellent. I am on the board of directors. It's an organization that I 100% believe in. They've got what are called information specialists. You call them and they will answer your question, or they'll say, I'll get back to you. Or you can email them. They also have this program which is called a Family Support Navigator. And that's when you're really struggling with your school, maybe the school's not listening to you. They'll set you up with another parent. I used to do this. They'll set you up with another parent who will help you answer questions. They'll come to your meeting. They're not an advocate, but they're kind of a support for you. And that's free of charge. Yes?
Is the IEP facilitator the same thing as an advocate, or are they?
No. An IEP facilitator is someone who comes from the state. So, it's kind of like, I don't know the metaphor I'm looking for, but you're asking for help from the people who are hurting you. That's kind of like.
Are there resources for advocates when you need one, and any that are like not a?
Yeah. So most law firms that if you just look up like special ed lawyer in Maine, they'll have an advocate that works for them, or some advocates work on their own. There isn't any really regulation for advocates, so you're gonna have to kind of do your due diligence and asking them. We have about 8 minutes, and I just want to. Okay, I want to just show you a couple more slides. So this is something I'm really passionate about, and actually I met with Portland schools today. I went from substituting at Moore, then I went to central office, and we talked about forming an advisory committee for the district that's made up of families in special education. The district is very committed to listening to families. They're doing a whole reorganization. It was a really great meeting to leave from, so I was very happy. Building strong school and family ties. So as I said, you are an advocate. Whether you wanted that job or not, you are now an advocate. Email. The school loves phone. I love email, right? Because then you can go back and like, what did I say and when did I say that? Set expectations for communication. A lot of times parents are frustrated because they don't hear from teachers. but you may just need to come up with a system, and that can be put in your IEP. I know I'm turning up the speed a little, so. You can call an IEP meeting at any time. And when you get to like the secondary level, when your child has a million different teachers and you're chasing down this and chasing down that, just call a meeting. Don't try and email everybody. And ask lots of questions. I want to show you, this is something that I create for my daughter. It was first for her IEP meeting when we had new teachers. Now I actually give it at the beginning of the year to her gen ed teacher when there's a new teacher. So it talks about what she likes to do, her strengths, her needs. See, like her strengths, she's very motivated by external rewards. So you can just really phrase anything the right way. Things to know. So that just sets a tone, right? If you're a classroom teacher and a parent sends that to you, you might say, oh, she's that parent, but that's okay. But it also sets this tone of, I want you to know about my child. And when you're in an IEP meeting and your child's not there, that picture reminds them, my child is a person, right? I tell families, it is 100% personal for families, right? Those children are our lives. But for teachers, it can't be personal at all. Teachers can't take it personally. So it gets sticky sometimes. Oh, here are just some communication you may want to think about, and these are just pulled them off the internet, right? So this would be something that you would send into school. If you have a child who doesn't really communicate that well, this way the teacher can say, oh my gosh, you know, I saw that you were playing toys yesterday after school. Like, it just helps with that, the teacher and the student. So that's communication that comes from you. Here's a daily report that teachers can send home. And then here are my resources. Okay, I want to make sure I get to these. So the first one is Maine Parent Federation. They're excellent. They have a good website. We do a yearly conference. There's all types of webinars. We did a lot during COVID. Disability Rights Maine is another resource. I will tell you, they only really take very egregious cases. They're free and it's lawyers, but like it has to be really bad. They're just so overworked. And then there is this informal Facebook group called Quirky Maine Moms. If you're a part of it, I'm a part of it. Lots of questions. I mean, you're asking parents, so the answers are, you know, right or wrong. Here are my two websites. Understood.org is so good for families. So good for college students too, who just need like accessible, plain language. And then Rights Law is a really good web. The website is not great. It's a little bit like messy, but I will say that it really has a lot of special ed law on it, a lot of cases. If you really want to do a deep dive on, you know, evaluations or deep dive on occupational therapy, Rights Law might be it. And then finally, that is my email address. Email me anytime you want. I did start up a group of Portland families or parents of children who are receiving special ed services. And we were meeting on Zoom, like we only met a couple times. I sort of wanted to see what would happen with this advisory council, and so I'm gonna revive that. So if you're interested in attending those monthly Zooms with me, email me. I would love to have you.
Are they still looking for parents for the advisory council?
They haven't even like conceptualized it yet. It was just, I was like ready to go in and be like, this is why you need to do it. This is such a good reason. And they were like, oh no, we think we're gonna do it. So be involved in your students' life or their school life. Thank you. I'm so sweaty. Oh, thank you. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for that. Let's give her one more round of applause.